Members, I'll call the meeting to order. The first item is our Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Vice Chair, could you read our mission statement?
The mission of the Marshall Public School District is to educate, support, and prepare all learners for success.
Approval of the agenda. Make a motion, please.
So moved.
Need a second.
Second.
Any additions? If not, let's vote.
Got your name up here
Motion
already, Sarah.
carries. Tiger Spotlight.
The Tiger Spotlight tonight, we want to recognize Aaron Zemer. This is Aaron's last evening as a board member. So we're going to recognize him tonight. Just want to take a minute to thank Aaron for his time spent on the board. He joined in 2018 and his one term accomplished a lot. So Aaron, thank you for your commitment and support over the last 4 years. We do have, we give him a hand. We do have a little token of our appreciation. We'll have Jeff present down here for you.
Well, now she it's usually right in the front.
Right.
You're fine. Go ahead. Okay, all right. I know, yeah.
I need to put it away. It's kind of cool, but.
Oops.
Uh-oh.
Okay, at least you did it, not me.
The top and bottom are attached, so.
Yes. Real quickly, I don't want to take too much time, but I just want to say thank you to everybody who made this experience so enjoyable to work for our schools. Jeremy, you and Dion and the staff have done a tremendous job. This board has a lot to be proud of over the last 4 years with getting Southview approved and getting the CTE Center going. It's exciting times. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody and I've really appreciated it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Public forum, now is the time that the public can approach the board. Does anybody like to approach the board? Moving on to our presentation, Science of Reading. Ms. Love, it's always a pleasure to have you.
I'm happy to be here. If it was the middle of the week, I might not be, so we'll see how the rest of the
Good,
week goes,
does it?
huh?
But it
Oh, there
does.
we go. Yeah, thank you for having me. I always enjoy visiting with everyone, especially in regards to something that I'm so passionate about, which is teaching our youngest kiddos to read. It's really what makes all other learning possible. So it's my passion, really. So with that, I know we visited a little bit last year about the science of reading, and so kind of just a reminder and an update as far as where we're at and how things are going. So true or false? If, as a child, you are sufficiently motivated and you come from a home where reading is very valued and you're read to, you learn to read with ease. Is that true or false?
Very true.
Final answer?
Good question.
It's actually false. There are a number of students who are very well-intentioned and parents that have great hopes and dreams for their kids, just like everybody. But there are at least a third of our students who, despite being read to, despite all of those things, have a significant difficulty in learning to read. And so with that, you can kind of see the national reading scores there. A third of our fourth graders don't read on a basic level. A third are at risk for not achieving grade level expectations, and another third are most likely kids who will learn to read no matter what type of instruction they receive, but that leaves 2/3 of our kids who really need very explicit and systematic instruction. And that's really what the science of reading is helping us better understand and inform us as to how our brain develops and how our brain actually learns to read. And so the challenge is getting all of our practices to align with what the science says. And so, like many of you, I was taught to learn to read in a school that valued more, it was called whole language. And so we had Dick and Jane books and things like that. And the theory there was that if you were immersed with great books and you really wanted to read, that is really what it took to learn how to read. And so that's called the whole language theory. On the other end of that, there was the phonics group of educators who felt like students needed very explicit phonics instruction. And so the criticism of that was that it was boring and it was repetitive, and the whole language folks thought that that wasn't necessary. And it actually ended up being the reading wars. Have you ever heard of the reading wars? Yeah, it actually was titled the reading wars, which is interesting. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and how we kind of got to that point. But the prevailing view for reading instruction was more of that whole language approach. And so reading instruction is, it'll come very easily for them, and it does for a number of our kiddos. And then the teacher's role is to primarily guide those students to make sure that they have the right environment, to give them everything that they need to learn to read. And then when that doesn't work, there was typically two responses. One is, well, they probably weren't read to at home and they just need to read more at home. If you read more at home, they'll pick it up and they'll be good to go. And then if that didn't work, then the problem is the child. There's probably something going on, that they have a reading disability. And this is all well-intentioned, educated people and our thought processes as we work with kids, thinking that it's one of those two things as far as how we can get our students to read. But usually it's neither of those two things. Usually it's because they were not taught how to actually read. And so what we know is through decades of scientific research that many children do struggle, and it's simply because they were not taught how to convert that written language into how the language actually works. And so just kind of a timeline or a history of reading development or of education in as far as reading development. Again, early 1900s, it was the Dick and Jane books. That was the prevalent theory of how reading developed. And then it kind of continued, and there was, again, all of this reading wars where there was two very different camps. There was a camp that said, nope, it's whole language, and there was a camp that said, nope, it's phonics. And so in 2000, the government actually got involved and convened a national reading panel. And that national reading panel said, this is how children learn to read. And it was a little bit of both, kind of. And so I'll explain in a little bit. But what came from that then was they had all of these findings, and a lot of the instruction that came from that was called balanced literacy. So they were trying to appease both sides. They were trying to say, well, if you do a little bit of whole language and a little bit of phonics together, that's that's balanced literacy, and that's gonna appease, both sides of the debate, if you will. Until about 2015, there was a couple of schools that really started to question that and started to question the science. And then in 2018, Emily Hanford published an article, and it was called Hard Words, Why Aren't Kids Being Taught to Read? If you ever have an opportunity to read it, it's not a super long article, but it's very interesting. And it really called more attention to reading and how kids actually learn how to read. And it basically just asked, if we know this is how kids learn how to read, why are we not doing it? Why do we have the results that we have? Why do we have a third of our fourth grade students who are not even at a basic reading level? And so that's, again, just called a lot more attention to the science of reading. And really, the science of reading, while it informs our instruction and how reading and writing develops, it's the culmination of studies from all of these different these fields or disciplines, And you probably are thinking, well, we've always had that, and we have, but the difference is that they've always kind of been in silos. They might have even been in the same university and doing some of the same research, but all the scientists that are cognitive psychologists, they all work together and they publish their own journals. All of the communication sciences, they do their own research and they publish their own in their own journals. And so it wasn't, again, until most recently in the early 2000s that they started to put all of that together to really understand exactly how the brain learns to read. One of the things that I find most interesting is the neuroscience and the functional magnetic resonance imaging, or the fMRIs, so that you can actually see how the brain is working as kids are, or adults are reading. And so that really has helped inform practices. So what do we know about learning to read? It wasn't until about 4,000 years ago that it actually became necessary. That's when they started to use like written symbols to communicate. Previous to that, it was just language. And so once they started to use early scribbles and hieroglyphics, then that had to change how we communicate. And so unlike the spoken language, which is just acquired naturally, there's a spot in our brains so that we are able to learn to speak without a lot of instruction. No one had to teach you how to talk. You just are born with that language part of your brain. You do not have that part, you do not have a reading part in your brain. So if you look at the brain, there's no reading center, and it's a matter of connecting different parts of the brain to learn how to read. And so looking at that frontal lobe where speech sounds are come in, looking at the temporal lobe, how our language, how we comprehend language, how you understand as we are speaking, you understand language. And so this is probably one of my favorite slides, and I think that it probably best illustrates, again, what we know about how the brain learns to read. But if you look at the picture on the far right, that is a picture of a reader's brain who has dyslexia, so they are struggling to learn to read. And the one in the middle is what a typical reader's brain looks like. And so you can see the activity, the areas that are the yellow and red are the areas that are activated as we start to read. And so the one on the far left, where it talks about the reading brain, those are all the different centers in your brain that have to connect as you are reading. So the frontal lobe, again, the language and the meaning, the parietal lobe, which is speech sounds, and the temporal lobe, which is letters and text. So it has to make connections between all three of those different lobes in your brain. And we have to teach or wire the brain in order to make those connections. Again, some kids just naturally develop that connection, but a number of our kids need help and support with systematic and explicit instructions to help connect the sound that a symbol makes, so a letter makes, so that you can make a word and then it makes meaning to them. And so if you provide support to the reader who has dyslexia, it will look more like a typical reader's brain, but different areas might light up because they might have some different pathways. But I find that very interesting. And so if you think about it, it all really starts with sound. And so if you are looking at a word, you typically don't look at the letters of the word. You hear in your mind, you hear the sounds that those letters are making. And so that's the phonological processor and the orthographic processor. So you are converting that into a word. Then you're taking that word and figuring out what the meaning is based on the context. And that's, again, how our brain processes or learns to read. So the good news is that all but 2 to 5% of our students can learn to read with the right instruction. And really, there's no magic bullet. There's not a program. There's not anything like that, but rather it's educating and helping our teachers understand exactly what that process looks like and assuring that we have the right instructional models in place. So I'll just give you an example. If you look at this, can you read those words?
Ecclesia.
What's that?
It's Greek.
Yeah, it is
Ecclesia.
Greek. It's Greek. So you have some experience with Greek, and you probably have some knowledge of what the letter sounds and those combinations are. But most of us would look at that and have no idea what those words say because we don't have the code. We don't know what sound goes with what symbol. Okay? This, on the other hand, go ahead and read that. You can certainly read that because you know the code, but can you understand and make sense of it? No, you cannot because it's not in a language that we are familiar with. Even if I read that to you out loud and I said, the Snobbles tramped and the Mengies to the Dwip, would you know what that meant? No, because you have no context. You don't know what that means. Even the spoken language you don't understand. And so this is really how we learn to read. So we first have to know the code, or we have to decode words. So we have to be able to look at a word and see the word and connect it to the sounds to make the word, to sound out the word. That's decoding. And then we also have to be able to comprehend or understand the spoken language. So it's really a product of those two things. So if you cannot decode, but you can read, or you can understand the language, what is 0 times 1? 0, right? So you are not going to be able to have any reading comprehension. If you cannot decode the words, even though you can understand spoken language, you're not going to be able to read. If you, on the other hand, can decode the words, like that last slide, but you don't understand the spoken language, what is the product of 1 times 0? 0. So it's really a multiplication formula. This is called the simple view of reading. And so you have to be able to decode efficiently, and you also have to be able to understand the spoken language. And so I'm going to give you an example of decoding and how, once this is wired in our brain, how strong it is. So I'm going to put up some words, and I want you to say the color that you see. Do not read the word. Okay, only the color that you see. So when I put it up there, just say it out loud.
Red.
Blue.
Blue.
Or red.
Red.
Yellow.
Orange.
Yellow.
Green.
The color's bad. I think it's
Purple.
green, but-
Yeah, but it took a couple of minutes, didn't it, to like actually stop your brain. Your brain can't help but read. As soon as you put those words up there, you automatically read red or purple or violet or black or green. So to stop your brain from reading is almost impossible because you have orthographically mapped the sound and the symbol together. You see them and you can't help but not decode those words because your brain has been wired to read. And obviously you have language comprehension because you can understand the spoken language. So those two together means you are a proficient reader who can comprehend. And so most often what we see with readers who struggle is that they haven't cracked the code. They haven't been able to figure out how to decode words and then make it make sense. And I will also say that you'll see some kids who maybe have memorized enough words to get by for a couple of years, but they don't have those decoding skills. So as they get older, now they can't decode the words and they still are going to be reading deficient as they get older. So that's the tricky part too, is making sure that we're not teaching kids to memorize, but we're really solidifying that orthographic mapping skill so that they see the word and not memorize the words. So why does all of this matter? The inability to read well is associated with lower levels of adult education attainment and lower income levels. And really, to me, it's what makes all other learning possible. Without reading, we are doing our kids a disservice. That is the one thing that we should guarantee every single learner is the ability to read. And that has always been our goal, so we need to continue to strive to do that. I always think this is interesting too. Have you heard of the Matthew effect? or the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. So that's what the Matthew effect is. It's actually a biblical reference. But the rich get richer. So, whoops, let me back up there. So let's say you start off in school, you get a good start, you learn to read, you read words, you know how to say them, and through reading, you start to learn the meaning of more and more words. So you see a new word, you look up the meaning, you've got that all figured out. So that is the rich getting richer, okay? There is a study that estimates that fifth graders who read at the 90th percentile, so they're proficient readers, they encounter about 2 million words every year in just the text that they read outside of school. A reader in the 10th percentile, so who is struggling to learn to read, only is exposed to 8,000 words in a year outside of school. That's how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So you just continue to add that up as they get older, and you can see how that has an impact on our kids. So because of that, these are the things that we have done so far that the science of reading has informed us. And so we have implemented very systematic and explicit instruction in phonemic awareness and phonics. So we implemented last year really great reading. I talked to you about that. This year we added what is called Haggerty. And so Haggerty talks more about like phonemic awareness, and that's just being able to isolate sounds. So taking the word cat and being able to isolate that into k, a, t, to hear all three of those sounds is phenomenal when you listen to kids and try to break apart those sounds. If they haven't had that instruction, it's really hard for them. So that's really important. And then the really great reading, again, teaching that phonics and helping them connect the symbol and making that symbol sound connection. We've also been very focused on data and assuring that our instruction is driven by data. We added what's called dibbles, and that helps us better understand where our kids are at in that decoding process. So if they are struggling with their letter names or their letter sounds, this is what dibbles does, and it helps us monitor that to see if they are hitting those foundational skills. And we talk a lot about those are not skills that we just teach and move on, but they are we teach and we reteach and teach again until they are mastered, every single one of them, before moving on. And so we need that data to help us know what skills they need and then monitor their progress in the attainment of those skills. And then also, obviously, our focus is on professional development because, as I said, our teachers are what matter. And so we use our building level PLCs to talk a lot about the science of reading, but also look at data. We have instructional coaches in both Parkside and Southview who are phenomenal and help our teachers out considerably. We have 11 teachers at Parkside and 4 at Southview that are taking, it's called Letters training, and it's through the Minnesota Department of Education. And that was a 2-year commitment. And that is excellent professional development. And then we also have a literacy advisory team at Southview, Parkside, and then a district level one as well that it's a group of teachers who meet on a regular basis to just talk about our literacy instruction, look at our progress, and then just talk about what next steps we need to make, what things we need to do, if differently, change, add, adjust, those types of things. And then finally, moving forward, we just, again, want to continue to grow in our knowledge and understanding of how children learn to read. I've been doing this for quite some time, and I can't get enough. It doesn't matter. I read the same things over and over and over, but it just really helps affirm my understanding and knowledge of how all of this works together. And I will say that in the last 2 to 3 years, it's just been exciting to read the same things. Like, I don't know if some of you have in the past, and maybe Jeremy and maybe Bill can relate to this, being in education, but you always had like the flavor of the month. Like, this year we're going to do this because this is what works. This year we're going to do this because this is what works. And really the science of reading is saying that that isn't it. This is how the brain learns to read. So there isn't a flavor of the month. There is no magic bullet. There's nothing like that. And that's, again, all of my research and reading and understanding have all went back to that simple view of reading. We got to teach kids to decode and assure that they understand the language. That's how reading comprehension develops. So, yeah, that is everything.
Darcy's-
I think it's excellent. Darcy, you and I talked earlier, and I talked to Jeremy about that a little bit. 11 staff at Parkside and 4 at Southview is the beginning. We need to have them all on board. This is best practice research based upon science. I hadn't seen this before this. And I did best practice research for a long time in reading. Reading is at the core of success in school.
For sure.
So one thing you and I talked about earlier is the staff development money. It's hard to get people to be creative at the end of a workday, the PLC at 2:20 till whatever. So, I think we need to put some money into summertime to our people, all the people, to offer it, to get them there, and for us to have everybody on board.
Right.
But you can't do that unless you provide the time
Yeah.
without other distractions to focus on that professional development. And Jeremy, you heard that from me. I know we have staff development money in our district. And as I shared with you, share with your colleagues, administrative colleagues, and
Right.
Beth, at the district level with staff development money, this is what I need. This is what we need in grades K through 4 to get this staff development fully
Right.
developed. And I'm fully behind you. I, as you said, I've always felt that way as a teacher and and as a principal. The key to success in school is the ability to read.
Yep.
Four
Absolutely.
teachers enough at Southview? That's not very many for Southview.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
4 teachers aren't enough
No.
at Southview at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, that's the number of teachers going through that program as the initial round.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other things that
And
they're
it was,
doing.
it's
There's
a
professional development.
it's a 2-year commitment. And they can use those credits for continuing education, but otherwise it's a commitment, and it's there are 8 units, and so it's 2 times a month that you have to commit a half a day outside of your school day. And,
It's a big
they're not
commitment, but-
compensated for that. What's that?
Question, is that state program coincide with this science? Okay.
Are the colleges using this with new teachers? Have
Yeah.
they,
Colleges
have they,
learn from us.
I know, have they caught up with what this is?
Not all of them. Mm-mm. Not all of them. That
This seems like a huge
they talk
change.
a significant amount about that. They teach typically both sides of that. They'll teach about whole language and they'll teach about
Phonics.
phonics instruction. But it takes some time for everything to get caught up.
That's part of those literacy teams Darcy talked about, and having these teachers going through that letters program. Then they are taking that back to the rest of the staff and helping
And the
with the
staff that have
implementation.
been here for 20 years
they're
or more,
becoming
they're
catalysts for
buying
the-
into it? Or
Yeah,
for the
yes.
most part, or they,
Yeah, I would say so. We have a lot of teachers who, even though they're not able to take that letters training, they are ready to go. And I think you see that it results more immediately too.
that's important.
Yeah,
Well,
And
and your
I-
middle school and high school colleagues, they're seeing the difference as well.
yeah, yeah.
So how are they doing that, Darcy? When you find a child that's struggling, are they going through some tests with the child to see how it's coming one-on-one, or?
Yep, and so, for example, this week, we were supposed to do it starting last week, but the weather got in the way. But, so through that DIBELS testing, we would screen all kids to see if they have certain key indicators or key skills. And then if they don't, then they would be pulled out, and then we would do another set of assessments that better help us diagnose, like, where exactly on that continuum are you? And then we would meet as a team in our data meetings to say, this kiddo needs intervention time and they're going to go to a reading intervention teacher, or this kiddo needs a little extra help here. So in your small group, in your classroom, this is what that's going to look like there. So it's really about looking at that data, then diagnosing or doing a diagnostic assessment, and then taking that information to figure out how we can best serve that student and help them move forward. And a lot of times it's not forever. It's just that they might be on one skill that's going to take more practice and support to get there.
It's an exciting program.
Yeah,
It
Very
is.
much so.
It is. It's dramatic. Thanks for leading this.
yeah,
Thank you, Darcy.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want me to do anything with this? Okay.
Thank you, Darius.
Consent agenda, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. It is approved. Financials, motion to approve the financials. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
It's open for discussion.
Just a couple of things to point out. Food service, again, one of the November bill will be in the next board meeting. It came in later, so next month will seem like it's doubled. And then a few things within the bills. I had emailed Mr. Mulso a list of some things that he might have questions about. But there's a couple of things that I would like to point out. There's one for an Anthony Hoffman for $9,200. Typically, when we have a payment to an individual that high, I'd like to explain it, and it was the workshop speaker from last fall. The city of Marshall, we paid $13.54. That was for the pumps out at the high school, the water pumps out at the high school. And then you'll see one for Lockwoods for $51,000. That was for the pickup that we had budgeted for last year and then budgeted again for this year, and we actually have it, and we're able to use it last week. That was to replace the 1999 gray pickup, which is still working, which was great last week because we actually had 4 pickups with plows, which somewhat saved us money, so we didn't have to call Hiskins or a contractor in to help. So it's working well as long as the gray pickup is working. Otherwise, we'll be back to our 3 vehicles.
Very good. Any other comments? Please vote. Is approved. Anything else on our financials?
I just wanted to point out, if you look month by month on that first page, it looks like there's a pretty big dip between October and November. November is typically a month that our Gen Ed aid is lower that we receive. You'll see that it should go back up in December and January. We get a couple of bigger payments in those months.
Very good. Board forum, board members, anybody have anything they'd like to bring up?
my child collaborative meeting was postponed until Wednesday, so it'll be Wednesday, so I won't be able to report. to-
Maybe Wednesday.
Yeah, maybe Wednesday. But it will be Zoom if the weather's bad, so we'll have it either way.
Very good. Administrators report.
And a few things to share with everyone today. My report, first of all, I talk about the weather. First of all, we certainly waited all summer for some precipitation, and December is bringing it on in full force. So I don't remember the last time we had a 4-day-long snowstorm or 5-day-long snowstorm, and last week was interesting. We used e-learning days last week, and we were visiting, Aaron and I were visiting earlier. When we first talked about e-learning days, maybe 3 years ago, we didn't think that was something that we could do. And now looking at how we can handle those days and how we can have continuity with education on those days, still productive days. So it's nice to have that option, even though we only get 5 and it took 3 in our first week. But I think it was nice to have that option because the roads were really bad last week. And this week is not looking great either. So we'll continue to work through those and make the best decisions we can in those mornings to try and keep everyone safe, and with the priority being getting to school as soon as we can. I also want to mention the CTE Summit. We held that on December 2nd. A really good turnout for that. We had a lot of businesses show up, and we had some really good discussion around CTE education and how that affects students through high school and then as they even move on in the workforce. So appreciate our community feedback and participation in that event that we have been doing every year now for the last 3 years. It's something we want to continue doing. And then I had just called out my report just a thank you to Aaron as well. We've talked about that earlier. So moving on to the other buildings, our early childhood, they had a big thank you to the Pride and the Tiger in their note this this time educators for parents and the children birth through pre-kindergarten. They had asked for a grant for some conscious discipline curriculum materials that they were awarded. There's a picture included in their report. Emily's got up on the screen here. They were able to get some things to bring that into their programming as well. So thank you to Pride in the Tiger for that, and then really for all of the grants that they give to our schools and support our schools in so many different ways. Pride in the Tiger has been a great partner for us. Parkside also calls out, they had the high school volleyball team come and visit a couple classrooms. Mrs. Larson and Miss Nedick are big volleyball fans, and they were excited with the kids about it. So after the state tournament was won, they invited the volleyball team to come in and visit their classrooms, and the kids had a lot of fun with that. So that was really fun for the both the high school kids and the kindergartners to get that visit. It was a fun time for the high school girls, and they get to do that as well. Was good. Southview and Parkside both talked this month in their reports about the DIBELS testing that Darcy talked about a little bit. So the intervention teachers, including EL and the reading, the title teachers, have been helping with that testing at the two sites. That assessment helps teachers determine who's at risk and needs additional support. It also helps the building's progress monitor students make sure they're showing the adequate growth that they're looking for. So some important work taking place with that. Middle school, on Monday, December 5th, they had invited, Deanne mentioned the bill for Tony Hoffman. That was a presenter we brought in to visit with middle school, high school, and Maytech students. It was a powerful message about being and staying disciplined. This was a grant from the Pride in the Tiger as well that helped cover this cost. It was a big piece, it was an expensive piece, but it was really well received. Tony shared life experiences and how he went from being in prison to coaching Olympic BMX racers. I mean, that alone is exciting for the kids to hear about someone did that, but then just his whole story around it. He started a nonprofit for youth, and he goes around and does these presentations to different schools. So he was at the high school and at the middle school, and in between, he was able to go over to MECLA. He surprised those kids to Maytech. He surprised those kids and spent some time with them out there as well. So it was a good day and a good message for our students. High school also shares that on Wednesday, the 23rd, they had some business tours that took place. Jessica Meyer is with the Private Industry Council. She is our Work Learn coordinator this year. She worked with local businesses to host groups of teachers to come in on their workshop day. So they follow the career wheel in the different areas on that, and these teachers go and spend some time learning about these different businesses or locations in town. So that was, we did this is the second time we've done this. It's been very well received by both businesses and the teachers. Brian had done some feedback surveys that were very positive. So we visited this time around, the Merit Center, Amerhart, Brow Brothers, North Memorial Ambulance, Lockwood Motors, and Studio One. So a variety of places that maybe some of the teachers had never been in before. The picture Brian has shared in his presentation, that's one of our Spanish teachers, that's Steph Scarset actually. She is driving a virtual 18-wheeler, I believe, is what's going on in that video, is with some of the training systems they have out there at the Merit Center. So really nice afternoon for the teachers to make those connections, and something we hope to continue to do with other businesses. Maytech also shares that students from Maytech are participating in a community service event where they're serving food to the riders of the Dakota 38+2 ride. They'll be going to SMSU where they welcome riders and provide them with a meal. So it'll be a nice event for those students as well. Activities, Mitch shares a few things this time. There's a lot going on in activities department all the time. He called out just a couple things. Dylan Luwaji is a wrestler with our high school team. He won his match on Friday and took the new school record. So he's leading at 165 wins at this point, and a lot of the season left, so I'm sure that will continue to rise. Jonah Verstrate was recently named to the All-Star, was named and able to participate in the All-Star football game. He played at US Bank Stadium on December 10th. Chidi Wakama also was named to the All-State academic team, so some fun things for a football team. Juniors were recently selected by ALT as Excel winners, and the ALT also congratulated AAA winners. So for Excel winners this year, Morgan Biela and Dylan Luwaji were both selected, though they will move on to the state level, and winners will be announced in February for that. And the AAA winners were selected by ALT. Congratulations to Lauren Weary and Jackson Lent. They will move on to region competitions to compete against other Region 2 AA selections.
Question, do you know who the 14th team is in the South Conference?
Oh, not off the top of my head, I don't, Bill. Yeah.
What has been determined.
That was determined, yes. I don't remember who it was. Drawing a blank right now. Director of Teaching and Learning, Beth calls out the Teacher Development Handbook that was last reviewed in 2015. So we pulled that committee together, and Beth is doing a nice job kind of reviewing that and looking at our practices and alignment with the updated Danielson framework and making any changes necessary there that will bring forward for implementation for next year. She also mentioned the CEO class. That's a class we've talked about a few times at the board table. They have launched their class business, Minnesotified. You may have seen some posts and such about that. It's really been taken off very well. They were selling sweatshirts, tumblers, mugs, stickers.
Stickers, yeah.
Variety of things.
If you haven't seen the logo yet, find a place to find it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
These kids really did a nice job with it.
Stickers.
Yeah.
They were at the Kindle Market for the young entrepreneurs at the Y.
They've kind of been making the circuit selling things. I believe they sold out of their first sweatshirt and they're doing some long sleeve tees or something now, but they put together a really nice product and have done a really nice job with that. That class has been a lot of fun to watch coming together. So now coming in January, they're going to this class business is a short-lived thing, and then they're going to create their own businesses in the second semester as their project. So
Who's facilitating that again?
Shanda Walker,
Yeah.
is her name. Yep. SPED, Jackie calls out at the Parkside team. They're focused on parent and family engagement this year. Overall goal is to have positive relationships, positive professional relationships, and interactions with families. They also hope to help parents interact with child about the school day, even though it might be difficult for some students with disability. So some examples that Parkside SPED team is working on this year are communication books, communication sheets, and some positive phone calls and text messages. And in Jackie's report that's attached, she has some pictures of some different things going on there, but some very positive things happening. Finally, Mary Kay shares in her report this month that each building is modifying district plans to look at the building responsibilities for a successful testing season this spring. So going through that whole plan in alignment with the state requirements for that. And she also shares that the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, they are using some of that money, some of that grant money that's available to us, allowing teachers an option to apply for funds to have some American Indian resources in their classrooms. So it's like an open grant that's out for classrooms.
Question is, but are we still having difficulty filling paraprofessional?
We are having difficulty filling paraprofessional positions. We have, I believe, 5 positions open yet in the district that we're looking for applicants for. And we can also use subs and.
I know.
Yeah.
We're not alone on that either.
No, it's a statewide, probably nationwide thing, but we really struggled to fill everything this year. And it puts extra burden on the people that are here.
Yeah, it does.
Ian, I'll let you talk about yours.
Thanks. Just a couple of things to make the board aware of. The time clock system that we use, we've had in place for 4 years now. It's housed out at SWWC. They're no longer going to house that system. So we have 3 choices of either going directly to Time Clock Plus, going with SWWC system, or going with a frontline system called Time and Management. The SWWC system just doesn't seem like a good fit for the size of our district. So we looked at going directly with Time Clock Plus, and then Frontline's product. Frontline's product is a little higher priced, but we are already using 4 of their products. So it would streamline a lot of things. It would be a one user login. It would also help manage absence time. So administrators would be able to see. So if you're out of sick leave, you wouldn't be able to put in sick leave. It would actually have you put in for without pay. Would tie in directly. Nicer. We're working with Frontline to see what they can do to get that cost down, but we've got a little time. We wouldn't implement the new system until probably March or April, and then test it out before the new year next year. And then just one other thing was, it's been, I believe, since 2006, since we've had an update on our job descriptions and our compensation review. We reached out to 5 different companies, consultants that do that. We have heard back from 2 of them, and we have meetings set up this week to visit with them about what that looks like and the cost. And we'll probably visit with the city a little bit because they do that. I think it's every 5 years or maybe even be more
What do you
than
plan
that.
to do with that information?
Well, first thing we have to do is update our list because our list is, we have been updating it, but when I started, Tricia, Gwen, and I sat down and we still had things like recess aides and positions that didn't even exist anymore. The other thing is to update our job descriptions and then get a compensation review because a lot of those positions have changed. Our media aides, help with technology, our kindergarten aides expectations, I think are different. I'm not sure that that'll change compensation or their rankings, but at least it helps the employees see where their job ranks.
A lot of times a question comes up and having an accurate job description would be helpful.
And then the revised budget I will have done by the first meeting in January, so you guys can see that.
Very good. Moving on to our discussion items, first readings of policies 501 through 510. Anybody have any comments or questions? This will be our second review of policies 534. Any comments or questions?
This is the one just to remind people the updated language from MSBA really does not change practice in Marshall. We have not been food shaming or taking meals away. The policy just clears up that language and follows the practice we've already had in place.
Then we move on to our discussion item of summary of the Superintendent Jeremy Williams evaluation. Any comments? Moving on to our action item, certification of the 2022 payable 2023 levy to be used for the 2023-24 school year. Motion.
Move.
I'll second.
This is just for the board to certify the amount that presented last meeting, which then will be sent to the county.
Any more discussion?
I think it's just great. A 0.74% increase based upon what the county and the city is doing is just huge.
I'll call for a vote. Is approved. Resolution establishing combined polling places. Motion to approve. Okay. Open for discussion.
So this resolution, we do not have a vote necessarily scheduled for next year, but if we were to decide to move forward with a operating referendum or a capital projects levy or something for next year that we would have to run ourselves, we'd want to have one combined polling place. So we need to do this resolution before the end of the calendar year to have that as an option for us for next year.
Very good. Any other comments? Hearing none, please vote. It is approved. Excuse me. Next action item is support staff memorandum of understanding addressing the addition of paraeducator online training and assessment. It's quite a title.
That's quite a title.
Motion to approve it.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
This MOU is in the para contract. In order to advance classifications, they need to pass the para protest. And the para protest has been named specifically by MDE. They have now added another testing option with the understanding that para pro might be fading out. So we want to allow the paras to be able to take the new test that's available. We would still administer, we'd still cover the cost of just adding this other testing option that was not available when we wrote the contract.
Makes sense. Please vote. It is approved. Thank you, board members. The meeting is adjourned.